Hello, and welcome to the very first Adventures in .NET podcast. With us today is your co-host, Caleb Wells. Want to say hi, Caleb?
Hey, guys.
And I am Shawn Clabough, and we are two .NET developers, both been working with .NET for quite some time. And with this first episode, we just kind of want to give you a background of the both of us and see what got us started in programming and what our experiences in .NET and kind of one of our favorite projects. So you want to start it off, Caleb?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Shawn. I'm really looking forward to this podcast. I think we're going to talk about a lot of cool stuff in the Microsoft sphere, .NET Core, TypeScript, Azure, C#8, some of the stuff coming out with that, Link, Identity Server. We've got a long list of topics to discuss. Really looking forward to doing the podcast and to getting some good guests on and having a good time.
Yeah, me too.
As for me, I've been tinkering on computers since DOS. I remember pre-teen and I was on DOS just typing in all the commands to see what they did. Which didn't always work out so well. But I've kind of taken a circuitous route to get to where I'm at. My bachelor's degree is actually in graphic design.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I've always been good with computers, but I kind of decided early that programming wasn't for me, but I kept being led back to it. And my entrance into .NET was actually a junior level developer position where I was not qualified at all. And they hired me anyway.
Sink or swim, huh?
Right, exactly. Right. They hired me anyway, and a lot of on-the-job training. Right. But I've been doing .NET for, I guess, 15 or more years now. Really enjoy the framework, especially C#. I think it's a great language, well written. I've used a lot of other frameworks and languages in the past. PHP, VBScript, did a little Java, classic ASP, of course.
Yeah, I did some of that too. Do you remember what that first .NET project was that you got shoved into?
Yeah, it was actually, the company was Hancock Fabrics, which they no longer exist. But
not because of you.
No, not because of me. Because of me, that they had some issues well outside of their development team. But I was brought on to actually manage and develop some internal applications. And, this was really, desktop apps and web forms, a lot of ADO.NET. I actually ended up doing some EDI integration with IBM DB2. And, we've come a long way. Let's put it that way. .NET
has
definitely come a long way. So I'm really happy where I'm at now. Like I said, I've been doing this for a while. I'm currently a senior developer at Typhon Group, and we're developing software as a service for nursing schools across the country and even across the world. We've got a few in Europe and I think one in Australia. But we're taking on the task of rebuilding the application from scratch and hosting everything in Azure.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that leap.
Yeah, I've been looking at doing something that with the current projects that I have.
Yeah.
But I've been just so busy, I haven't been able to really get into what's it going to take to move everything up to Azure.
I'm glad that our boss has bought in and is backing us up with this change, because it's gonna be a transition, but it's gonna be a good one. And then when it comes to favorite .NET projects, there are quite a few out there that are really good. One that I can think of is Identity Server by Dominic Bayer and Brock Allen.
Mm-hmm.
I think it started out right as open source, and some of it's been folded into .NET Identity, but it still has a standalone version. It's really good. But one from Microsoft that I've used a good bit in the past 6 months or so is actually, I think it's called eShop on Containers. And it's kind of their kitchen sink idea of basically throwing all kinds of practices and patterns at you on an application. It's all Docker and containers. It's got several versions of the back end and front end, MVC, Angular. They're doing, they're showing you how you can do microservices, service buses, a good bit of stuff. So it's nice that you can get in there and dig around and look at bits and pieces and see how they approach certain problems or certain infrastructure and kind of, glean some knowledge there.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Yeah, I was at a conference a couple of years ago and took a workshop with Brock talking about identity server. So that was really interesting and good there.
Cool. Yeah. Well, so what about you, Shawn?
Yeah, talk about identity server. One of the things that we're doing where I'm at, I work at Washington State University. Been there for about 6 years now. Spent most of my professional development career in university setting. So I worked for University of Idaho for 17 years before that. And so, but yeah, along with identity server, we're recently switching over to using Okta. So it's two-factor authentication system for a lot of our, logins and systems that are at the university. So
that's OKTA?
Yeah, OKTA.
Okay.
Right,
yeah, I think I've heard of it. Yeah.
Right. So I made a proof of concept to get my system switched over to that, but haven't flipped the switch yet. But I wanted to make sure that the central systems moved first and they worked well. And then I'll be looking at making that switch on the application that I work in. So my start into programming was quite some time ago. I was on my Angular story and kind of went through the whole thing here for the long version, but it started back in fourth grade. This was before they had PCs, but it was show and tell. And a guy came in and talked about this machine that his dad built. And he talked about what you could do with it and what it, various different things about it. And it's like, wow, that sounds really cool. So I asked him if I could come over and look at it someday. Didn't know the guy too well, but I just wanted to see what this thing was. And so it was for me from the start, just computers. And so I went over there and just for hours spent dinking around with this machine. It had no graphics. It was text only. And about the only program you could play on it was kind of this artificial intelligence thing that you ask it a question and it just throws back some random question back to you, and it just kind of go back and forth. So that's when I first fell in love with computers, things like that. And then the schools didn't get computers until I was in junior high. And at that point, we got some TRS-80s and one Apple II. And all the TRS-80s were, cassette tape drives, things like that. So, but that's when I first started programming. And even at that point, I was in every computer lab that you could sign up for. For this time I could stay after school because they left the lab open after school. I was in there, trying to learn that. And then I did the same thing through high school. And then in high school, it was Apple II Pluses. They had a lot more of those. So I took every class I could, learned it. I had a guy that worked for a hacking magazine kind of for Apple IIs. And so I learned from him. And I grew up in the Seattle area, so I wasn't too far from Microsoft. So I remember when they kind of first kicked off and started growing and things like that.
Yeah.
Then I went to college and wanted to learn how to program naturally. So I signed up for computer science. But at that point, the classes were more mini mainframe type classes and really low level. My first class was in Pascal, and then I learned Fortran and COBOL and even machine language and things like that, how to build an assembler. And it wasn't what I wanted because I wanted to learn how to program desktops. At that point, it was IBM PCs that I was trying to learn how to program. And they didn't have that. So, but I stuck with it and finished that degree and got a minor in business. So looking back on it, I really do think that degree helped me out, not so much in the computer science type stuff, but in the business things. Some of the other classes actually in the long term helped me out a lot because now when I'm working on a project, not only do I know the coding type of stuff, but I can understand the business reasons for the project a lot better than I would have if I wouldn't have taken economics or accounting or a lot of those classes there as well. So that really helped me out.
I found, right, that back in the late 90s, early 2000s, right, you really needed a degree. Whether it was in computer science or not, you needed a degree to get your foot in the door. But these days, I think companies are much more accepting of hiring people that have some experience over the degree,
Right.
which I think is right. It's a good transition, right? There's a lot of ways you can get into programming and into computers. And while I agree with you, computer science and a degree in general helps you with a different perspective, right? But it's not for everybody. So.
No, it's not. Yeah. And I've mentioned to other people, sometimes it might be better to go to a 2-year degree or voc school and get programming that way, or even boot camp. If you really don't know if it's for you, a boot camp might be a good option, because that's the way you're going to quickly find out if you want to keep on doing that every day or not.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah. Instead of spending 4 years and tens of thousands of dollars in a college degree, you're going to find that out, in a short period of time. Because, if you think about it, somebody that's 20 years old, they could end up doing this in the next 40, 45 years.
Right.
You got to find something that you want to get up every day and you're glad that you're going to work. And I can still say that I look forward to going to work to every day and programming and building stuff that helps other people do their work.
Yeah, you and me both, right? You have good days and bad days, but I enjoy what I do. It's a lot of fun, and it's fulfilling. So
Yep. So after college, I did some various jobs, and I was actually even an assistant buyer for a 17-store chain that did computers and electronics and things like that. And then I was in charge of the computers, and that was a really fun job, because as a buyer, that people are sending you all this stuff every day. I'd walk in, there'd be a stack of software or other thing on my desk, wanting us to put it in our stores. So I did that for a couple of years, and then they went out of business. So we got something in common there, but it wasn't my fault either. So.
Right.
Yeah. And so after that, I said, okay, what am I going to do? And I tried applying to various different computer jobs and really didn't get that much success. There was a store out of Spokane that was called Egghead Computer.
Yeah,
if you remember them. Yep. Yeah. So I applied for them, and that was right before they went out of business. So that wasn't good timing there. So then I said, okay, I'll go back and get another degree. I don't know why. I just wanted to polish things up because I'd been out for a few years. So I went out and got an IS degree. And that brought me more business experience and education there. So that was good. And then while I was getting that degree, I got hired at the University of Idaho. So it worked out really good for me. So got more education, which I love to do because I like to learn. And then got hired at the University of Idaho in their customer support for computers. Yeah. And my first project there was writing a help desk ticketing system. And I could only use a Unix machine back then. They didn't have Windows-based servers for me or even a SQL server or anything like that. This was 96, 97.
Gotcha.
So I only could use Perl and HTML. So this application was basically just a bunch of HTML pages with comment tags between the different tickets. And then the Perl would just basically slice and dice each one of the HTML pages and move it between pages depending on whose queue was supposed to be in. So before this system, everything was done by either sticky notes or broadcast emails. So nobody could really, see where things were at or who was working on it, because a lot of times with broadcast emails, they just thought, well, that other person that's on the email, they're probably working on it, so I don't need to. Well, and then everybody in the email thinks that, so it never gets done. So I said, we need a better system. So I came up with that. And then after that, we did get some Windows servers and NT4, and I started learning classic ASP.
Cool. It's amazing how fast things can shift or change from one environment to another, from mainframes to more desktop computing programming. When I was in the Air Force in the mid-90s, right out of high school, and just a couple of years before I joined the Air Force, they were doing everything on punch cards. right? So to go from punch cards in the early 90s to where we're at now, it's amazing how fast technology in general moves. But I guess that's part of the fun of what we do, is there's always something new to learn.
Yeah. So Classic ASP probably worked on that for about 4 years before, .NET came around.
Right.
And then I remember they were actually going to make a product called ASP Plus before .NET. Yeah, that never really occurred. And so .NET came out, and I really like that. And this was 1.1. I think it was my first, really large application that we built using .NET. And it was a content management system for the university because everybody was using front page.
Right.
And yeah, cringe. Yeah. And so I wanted to make a system that people didn't have to install the software. It was all, more WYSIWYG, just click on the page and edit it and save your changes. And so me and another guy put that together, and that probably lasted for probably 8 or 9 years. They kept on using that system. So it worked well. And the tricky thing about 1.1 is there was no master pages.
Right.
So we kind of, for all the templates for the web pages, we had to do that without being able to use master pages. We actually never even had the time to switch it to 2.0 or 3.5 or anything like that. So it stayed at 1.1, but it did its job, and it ended up having, at the end, there was probably 400 or 500 editors that had accounts in the system, and there were thousands of pages. It was with SQL Server backend, but it did well.
Cool.
That was probably one of my biggest projects and most satisfying projects because of just how many people it affected, and made their job so much easier, not having to do with front page or any other static HTML editor that they were trying to use.
Right.
So, stayed there for 17 years and then moved over to Washington State. And I work in the Office of Research there. So my main project is one large overall encompassing that does grants, proposals, and awards tracking. It also has a training module in it. So people that need to take training to understand grants or compliance or things like that, it has a module for that. Then we also have modules for compliance because we do research on animals and humans and things like that. So there's a lot of things that the researchers, the faculty have to enter into the system to say, this is what I'm going to be doing. This is how I'm going to be doing it, so on and so forth, to make sure that they're compliant and everybody can make sure that they're following the rules, and then auditors can come in and make sure that that's going on. So my current project is migrating some of our human compliance systems from a PDF form that they use in SharePoint to an online dynamic form with workflow and approval and reporting and things like that. So that's my current thing that I'm working on. I just finished the same thing for our animal compliance group, and that works really well. So we decided to move on and do that same thing for the human compliance group.
Cool.
And then I'm looking at, in the next couple of months, making a switch from getting all my central data from our data warehouse, which is fed by a 40-year-old mainframe. And the university finally invested in going to a cloud-based management system for all the financials and things like that instead of the old mainframe. So I'll be changing my integration between, the data warehouse and this cloud-based system. So that'll be really exciting too.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of your favorite .NET projects?
As far as projects that I haven't worked on, I'm looking forward to Blazor. That one really excites me. I do a lot of stuff. My stack right now is SQL Server, IIS, and then on the application I'm using, in this current application, it has all sorts of different hodgepodge of things. It has web forms in it. I've got MVC in it. I've got Web API. And then I'm also using Angular, the new Angular, in anything I do now. But before the new Angular came out, I actually have a few things in there that are AngularJS based on the client. So it's got so many different technologies in one solution.
Right.
And I want to slowly get out of the web forms parts and upgrade those into Web API and Angular because until I get out of web forms, I can't move to core.
Right. Yep.
And I want to move to core just so that, I'm a little more future proof and, get a little bit of performance, but just, make sure that I'm keeping things up to date so I don't have so much technical debt.
Right. And they're still supporting .NET Framework, and I think 4.8 has come out, but eventually it's going to be sunset. That's one of the things we pushed with the project we've been working on for our software as a service to use .NET Core and Angular. And we started it about 2.5 years ago. So we started it when they were both right at like a release candidate stage. And luckily, our boss agreed to let us pursue the application with those two frameworks. And it's worked out really well. Very happy with .NET Core.
Good. I'm just worried about, 3, 4, 5 years from now, the things that they're going to say, this is a .NET Core feature only, not in the full framework. I know the full framework is going to be around for quite some time, and it's working well for me. But, even with C# 8, I've already seen some things that they're saying are core only, not full framework. So
I think the biggest things are framework, but like you said, I was watching a webinar and they were listing the things that were going to be for both framework and core, and then the few things that were not. And like you said, as time goes on, more and more that's going to be focused on core.
So I'm thinking that with the Blazor technology, that'll be really cool because it compiles down to WebAssembly.
Right.
And then the tooling will really advance to that. And maybe even eventually I'll be just doing all of that and won't be doing much Angular.
Gotcha.
Because I think they're going to end up being similar, component-based architecture, pulling back to a web API backend.
Yep.
And so I'll be watching both of those. I have no plans on moving away from Angular currently because I do think that a framework like that does provide benefits currently. But, as more browsers really start supporting custom components and WebAssembly, and then when I can finally, ditch IE11,
yes.
Even mobile Safari gives me some headaches recently too. So once those are done, then I always like to stay, not on the bleeding edge, but I like to stay cutting edge.
Right. That makes sense. And it also makes your job more endurable. I do. I mean, I know some people who still code in COBOL and they do very well at it, but not something I would be interested in doing.
I remember very little of that, other than it's a sentence-based structure, everything ends in period, but that was a long time ago.
So if you don't have anything else, Shawn, I guess we can start to wrap this up. One thing I do want to say is we are looking to have a couple more hosts join us in future episodes. So stay tuned for that. And like the other Dev Chat TV podcasts, we're going to do picks at the end, right?
Yes, we are.
So Shawn, what's your pick for this week?
I'm going to make 2 picks. One of them is based upon my Twitter address. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, they can find me on Twitter. It's Whopper_dev, and it's Whopper like the movie that I'm going to pick, not Whopper like the candy. It's WOPR_dev. So if anybody already knows what I'm going to say, it's the movie WarGames with Matthew Broderick. When that came out in the theater, I saw it 6 times in one day. So I just went to the first showing and stayed the whole day and saw it over and over and over again. So I'll put in the chat, the WarGames, the movie.
Yeah.
And my second pick is going to be the .NET Conf. I got an email the other day from Microsoft that it's an online conf. It's free. They just announced that they're looking for presenters now. Yeah. So if anybody, listens to this and that's still open, I recommend them, go for it and present at .NET Conf, or at least it's the end of September is when the conference is. I don't have the dates in front of me.
We'll add them to the show notes.
Yeah, right? It's .NETconf.net.
Okay, great. My pick for this week, it's called the Enneagram. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a personality typing system, similar to kind of Myers-Briggs, except that there's 9 types in the Enneagram. The basis of it is ancient, pre-biblical even. And it's just it's an interesting way of looking at yourself and at others, and being able to provide people, I guess, with a little more grace, because we all have tendencies one way or the other. So, and that's it from me. Shawn, you have anything else?
The only other thing I think about that might be relative to this is I first applied to Microsoft because I'm in the Seattle area in 1985 or 1986. And back then, Microsoft wasn't really known.
Right.
So I had to find them through the Yellow Pages and track down where their offices were, and I applied. Never heard back from them. So I wonder if I'm still pending in their system out there.
Well, maybe we can get one of the guys from Microsoft on and look into that, right?
Yeah. So here I pulled up the .NET Conf. It's September 23rd to the 25th.
Okay.
Oh, and they're going to be talking about the launch of .NET 3, .NET Core 3.
Which is also going to be transitioned to .NET 5.
Right. It's when they're going to combine all the different platforms, Mono and those all into one to become .NET 5.
Okay. Well, Shawn, I've enjoyed talking to you on our first podcast episode. Looking forward to many more. And y'all come back for the next one.
Yeah, me too. Everybody come back. Send us ideas. Go to the devchat.tv website and submit ideas, or send us Twitter. How do they get hold of you, Caleb?
I am actually not a heavy social media person. They can message me or contact me through LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way. But I will put links to my website and my LinkedIn profile in the show notes.
Okay. Great.
Well, Shawn, thanks again. And we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Caleb. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com to learn more.